Hey, it's Joe, and welcome to the 7th Gathering of the Guild meetup. Today we'll be talking about the top trends in performance testing with some special guests I have joining us today. So if you have any questions about performance testing, this is the session for you. I'm just curious to know what people think of my predictions, if they're right, if they're wrong, if I missed anything. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. All right, so that's the official opening for the guild. As I mentioned, we're going to be going over the top 6 performance trends I see in performance testing. But first, some quick things. Before we get into it, before we start our journey, to make this fun, it really matters about participation. So to really make this fun for everyone, I really highly encourage that you participate in the chat, ask some questions, really treat it like a real meetup as you would in person, except it's virtual, which I think is always better. Virtual is always better. So definitely take advantage of the chat and the option to ask some of our experts some awesome questions. Like I said, we have some special guests joining us in a moment. But like I said, take advantage of the chat and let's make it as fun as possible. I know it's Friday, but I always have a good time. And if you don't know already, we're going to have another Perf Guild this year. And for the Perf Guild, it's going to cover some of the top trends we actually cover in this episode. But because you're watching, you get a special discount. If you go to perfguild.com now and you check out, buy a ticket, and use the code GuildCoin50, you'll get $50 off your ticket price. So that's just for a thank you for being a member of the meetup. So just use GuildCoin50 at checkout and get $50 off your ticket price. And even though this is an online event, I just want to remind you, even though I usually don't have to worry about it, is we still have a code of ethics. And if you want to know what that code of ethics, code of conduct is all about, all you need to do is go to guildconferences.com and click on code. Basically, you just boil it down to be awesome to one another. So this edition of the meetup is sponsored by Testem, and Testem wanted to give back to the community during this time of need. So make sure to check out their free community plan, which now includes 1,000 runs per month free. And I'm told that this is not going to last forever, this offer, so you definitely want to check that out. If you're joining us in the official meetup page, you should see a button down below for register now. If you're joining us on YouTube or on Facebook, I will have a link down below where you can click on that and get a free access to the community. Like I said, 1,000 runs per month. Cool stuff. Also, just 2 weeks away, Perf Guild is going to be starting. It's our online conference dedicated 100% to helping you succeed with creating performance testing and engineering awesomeness. To register, just go to perfguild.com. And as a thank you for sticking around, like I said, use the code GuildCoin50 to get $50 off your ticket. All right, so I have 6 top trends. I have 2 experts joining us in the roundtable. My first trend is shifting from engineering testing to performance engineering. But let's just introduce our special guest today. We have both Leandro Melendez, the senior performo, and Alex Podelko, both industry leaders. You probably know them already, but I'm just going to bring them into the guild. So guys, get ready to get into it.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Leandro. Hey, Alex.
Oh, I gotta get a little bit higher.
Yeah. Alex, I can't hear you for some reason. Still don't. There should be an icon on the top right in your browser, URL. It looks like a little camera. If you click on it, it should give you an option to mess around with the microphone. I hear some static. That might be a good sign.
Hopefully it's not me.
No, I don't. Hey, you're looking good there.
Do you hear me now?
Perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So
Great.
before we get into the top trends, and like I said, these folks are experts. I'm just someone that speaks to a lot of experts and kind of report it to you. I used to be a performance engineer in a previous life, but these guys do it day in, day out. So really excited to get their opinions here. So Leandro, before we get into it, maybe a little intro who you are for the folks that don't know.
Oh, well, Hi, I am Leandro Melendez, also known as Señor Performo in the testing underworld. I'm a manager of performance testing with Qualitas Group, a company that provides worldwide QA best practice and everything service related to QA, tool agnostics, and we can do anything testing, call us. And I am part of the Pervites family. I am the host of the Pervites Español show, where I try to spread all the word of performance to the Latin-speaking world in Spanish. And as well, Señor Performo, I have a blog where I try to post and share knowledge about performance and load testing, agile, general testing practices. And soon, YouTube video channel to also share a little bit more knowledge.
Awesome. Very cool. Great to have you, Leandro. Thank you. And Alex, what's up?
So my name is Alex Podelko. I do performance testing and engineering for Hyperion products at Oracle. I also involved in computer measurement group, which is a technology community with heavy focus on performance. You could see me on Twitter. Here is my Podelka. I say Podelka and LinkedIn.
Awesome. Great to have you also, Alex. Like I said, we have some awesome thought leaders here. So before we get into it, performance engineering, is it a real thing? Is this a term? This is a term I've been hearing a lot of. I'm just curious to know your thoughts on going from performance testing to performance engineering, if this is a real trend that you see as well. So Leandro, any thoughts?
Well, that's a kind of tricky question. It's interesting because I have been as well trying to fight the concept of performance testing being just load testing. But I think performance engineering could be a little bit considered above load testing or performance testing. I tend to think of it similar to performance assurance, a term that I like to use equaling. We have quality assurance, why not performance assurance? And performance engineering, we can get a bit crazy around terminology, specifics, definitions. To me, performance engineering goes a little bit on not only doing load tests, not only doing performance testing, but as well understanding a little bit on where could you have problems, how could you fix them, how to prevent them, what are the tasks that you should, could, and better do for all of your systems, and everything that could be counted around guaranteeing that your users will have the best experience using your systems, no downtimes, and if a downtime happens, that the system comes back quickly. So performance engineering, to me, it's a wide covering term that is the performance engineer, to me, should be someone that has good knowledge and overall all the areas related to assuring that your system performs, guaranteeing that your users will have a good experience. But again, as well, I would warn on getting locked down on terms, definitions, terminologies. It's a versatile role that you can have on your organizations. And do not lock it as well. It's just the guy that does the scripts. It's just the guys that fix the system. Again, it's a term that it's a bit malleable, dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't know.
So I have my own thoughts, but Alex, what are your thoughts on performance engineering?
So we definitely have that trend. I would actually say it always was that way. It maybe was some trend in the past for further specialization when required a lot of testers, so you could saw some people who just prepare scripts or run scripts and not doing anything else. Doesn't look like it is working that way anymore. People want to. My understanding of difference is that, say, performance testing or assurance means that we check performance and say is it good or not. Engineering, when we do next step and do something about it. I would say that I even see some trends that looks a little misleading for me, that now people want not only you to find problem, not even suggest what to do with problem, but even fix that problem yourself. So just somebody who do everything. I'm not sure that it is going that way, but looks like some expectation going even that far.
All right. So I must be completely off here because I think of it as a cultural shift, almost like agile. So it's like a movement where everyone's responsible for performance. And give me 1 second. For some reason, I'm hearing static here. See how I can fix it. So I think of it as, like I said, performance engineering is a movement, like agile is a movement where the whole team's now involved in performance. It's not just waiting to the end to have performance done. It's actually thinking about performance from the beginning, from the requirements, all the way through the life cycle where performance is actually baked into the product rather than waiting to the end. That's how I always thought of performance engineering. But like I said, maybe that's just the way I define it. But that's why I think it's seeing it as more of a trend. Just like most things that have moved more and more left in the software development life cycle, I see performance also making that shift there as well.
Yeah, I totally agree in parts what you're saying. Performance engineering is not only a role, but as well a set of knowledge and tasks and know-hows that should be shared with your team members, especially in agile environments, where they should better understand some of those performance engineering reasons, practices, do's and do nots. Super important to be spread all over the team.
And Alex, were you going to say something?
Yeah, so we definitely have the shift left due to agile practices, because before with waterfall process, everybody agreed that we should start early, but it was almost impossible for performance. Nothing was available. You could do some preliminary task or maybe talk about requirements, but not much more. And now you could start from really start from the very beginning and work through the whole process. In that sense, I completely agree with you on that. But it overall, due to change that we to agile, we get many more options how we can do performance. Performance testing in traditional way for waterfall was actually kind of one way how you could do it. Before release, you just do some realistic tests, and while it's still a valid practice and good idea to test your system before moving to production, now you could do many more things starting from very beginning and across the whole cycle. But I wouldn't necessarily say that it definitely a trend, but I wouldn't equate it to the trend from software testing to software engineering, because truly speaking, if we talk about titles, I always had titles performance engineer, and I try to hold on it in sense that I believe that it is much more than just the testing. Testing can one part of what we can do to improve performance.
Right. Well, I think we touched on this already, but I'm going to go to my second trend. And my second trend is shift left. We already talked a little bit about it, but I have some specific things around tooling, and I'm just curious to know what you all think. So, hold on. So when I think of a shift left, I always think of functional testing. It seems like performance testing is always lagging behind a little. Maybe it's just me, but functional testing usually goes first, and performance testing sometimes follows the same pattern. So what functional testing maybe 5 years ago, what they started doing was using the same tools and techniques and languages as their developers, because they wanted to get the developers more involved in creating functional automation, which didn't happen. But it didn't happen as well as I thought it would. But I've been actually seeing more of this trend with performance testing, where you see tools like Gatling using Scala, Locus using Python and Locus, Locus for Python, and also K6, which seems to be more code type of performance testing driven type things, which I think enables your developers now to get involved earlier in the life cycle, which then helps to shift left. So just curious to know, Leandro, is that something you've seen as well with your clients? Is this a need? People using more developer type tools that maybe can help drive performance earlier to shift things left in the performance life cycle?
Well, yeah, I have. It's funny because I've noticed two types of trends. Let's start with the bad news, the ones that are still trying to think of performance testing. Again, I have a war against this. Performance testing is not load testing, where you should only automate front-end processes and end-to-end and try to slam the system to figure things out. This is very waterfally, but it's one of the trends that I notice. And the other one are the ones trying to do the switch left practices, where many are stumbling a little bit on this, because the approach is still trying to, even it depends on your concept of these switching left practices, tasks, or things that you can do. Many still are a bit locked up in the tooling, like, hey, I'm just gonna earlier, probably as soon as the developers finishes, get my tester to create some automation, to bring Gatling, to bring JMeter, Locust, any of the load testing tools, where the switch left practice, which I think should not be new, should have been happened even from waterfall days. I think the surgence for this movement is out of need, because agile, pretty much there's no other way to do good performance assurance practices when you are creating software in an agile methodology. But many of these organizations or teams that I have seen are trying to just automate things because of the tool, in spite of the what I would call common sense tasks, where it's just we have the tool and we have to automate with it and slam it. I like a lot tools like K6, because they are more or less designed for developers, designed to be integrated with your code as soon as you finish a class, a method, an instance of your code, or even an API service or some mid-tier functionality. As soon as that is done, you can create some sort of automation for gathering metrics for performance. But the first step, again, on switch left practices, I haven't seen it this much, but I like it to be pushed way left, even to the meetings that you have with your customers, the requirements meetings, when you are starting to create those post-its with the tasks that say completed, done, and checked. Some of those should have performance metrics and be given to the developers when they are working on those new pieces of code or code that they are refactoring, and add, even in the same code that they are developing, adding some unit test or calling the unit test, not mock-up information, but to really get good measurements. Or as well, the same developer, hey, as soon as you finish this method, this class, this API, this service, can you, to mark as complete and be able to check in the code, can you create a Gatling call, K6, JMeter, whatever you are needing, just to be integrated easier with your continuous integration platform. So it's a set of tools, practices, and mindset that had to be, I think, rewired to get the best use and not to stumble trying to do agile with mini waterfall or fragile or however you want to call it, old practices.
Great. And Alex, you work for a large company. Have you seen a shift left at all where you work?
Yes, sure. We did shift left, of course. So we agile process, we do it all the time. And I would agree with you that in some way we follow functional testing, maybe because a little behind because we have more complex task
Hmm.
for performance testing, more dimensionality, not
Yep.
just fail pass. So and main part what is happening now, it is trend of automation to build it in continuous integration cycle or whatever kind of automation. As I mentioned to you, not necessarily it should be built in continuous integration, but it should be done in some kind of continuous automated way. Because with agile you just cannot keep up because you're getting builds many times a day and you just don't have time to test it. Involve manual steps in that, too much overheads. And and with tools we have it change that we have that before load testing tools was kind of individual tester environment, so it include everything you needed in one place. So what and more interactive kind of tools, and now we shift with automation we need more kind of command line functionality when you could start test and get everything by API and some tools, and that is a problem. And actually a lot of function in all tools we had a lot of functionality. Load runner was you see, and I maybe 20 years ago did the API calls from load runner using DLLs.
Yep.
So it all there, but it just focus was different.
Yep.
And with new tools which were developed in with developers and automation in mind, so they can be more convenient to use in that way. Unfortunately, they may miss some more advanced functionality. So if you could use it and integrate in the practice, it is fine. But for example, for products I'm working with, which require extensive and sophisticated correlation, most of these development-oriented tools just doesn't support anything like this.
Right. No, it's a great point about load runner, in that that's how I taught myself how to program. I used it like a C compiler, and I got a book on C, and I just was writing C in load runner and adding it to my tests, and it was really cool. Really loved it. So I guess another thing when I talk about shift left as well, though, is developers getting more involved. And a trend I've seen when I talk to front-end developers is Google Chrome has a lot of rich tool sets built into the dev tools, one of them being like Lighthouse. Do you see developers taking advantage of that? So like it's not like a full-on performance test, but as they're coding, they can actually look at the page and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe this image is too large. Really more performance, not from a tool perspective, but maybe how I code it up. Leandro, have you seen any developers you speak to using any of those types of performance techniques?
Well, some teams that I have worked with, they were very aware, as an example, with Visual Studio, when you have the diagnostics window, they were very aware, and I am not afraid of admitting I was not aware of the power of those functionalities that Visual Studio used to have, because as far as I remember, they removed it or are about to remove that functionality.
Yep.
But you could go and measure by the time of execution each line of code, And on some of the teams, and pretty much the teams that showed me that, they were a bit religiously verifying those type of functionalities. And that was a very good experience with teams that were used to it, were very performance engineering conscious, and were applying some of those best practices or fixing the code as soon as they were debugging it. And on the other spectrum of the side of things, some developers will fight against and totally say, I have no time for this. I totally and definitely will not look at this. I just need to deliver this, however it is working, and go as fast as possible. So it's a mix of cultural change, mindset, and some of those I loved that these SDKs had this tooling for performance mirroring integrated, which created some sort of awareness. But as well, I think that's a big role of the performance or QA person on the teams to be teaching, to be an evangelist of these type of things, and help everyone to be aware. Even supported by tools, things like integrations with Slack on your code. When you check in something and it's taking too long, probably, and you can do like a bit Pavlovian behavior, give a good pat in the back and make Slack automatically good. Tell, hey, this guy just checked in code that performs awesomely or even improved the response times. Or on the negative side, hey, someone checked in code that it's totally awful and please fix it, and public shaming awareness. But there are multiple techniques where I think it's a transition that most of the teams are going through and starting to be aware, because yes, as I said in the beginning, most developers, me starting as a developer, I remember it, your focus is, I need to finish this. Sometimes I don't even know why it works, but I better not touch it because it's working and I'm just going to send it. So it's a tug of war often with those situations.
Right. So Alex, what are your thoughts? It's built into the browser and I still can't get developers to participate. So yeah.
First, I want to point out that traditional node testing tools didn't include front end.
Right.
For a long time and until now, we have two different worlds, front end and back end. So, and actually the same with developers. People who write something on client side on JavaScript usually are not going to back end and vice versa. People who working with front end, they do use it. You cannot survive, I guess, if you do serious development without these development tools. But problem is that we still have a big gap between front end and back end, and we don't have a good way to put it together from performance point of view. We have some good tools that looking inside front end performance. We have good tools and technologies to stress backend, but now we need to merge it. And in this continuous integration, we need to check both sides from performance-wise. And here we have gap in tooling, by my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so this takes me my third top prediction here, and my third prediction is browser-based performance testing. This could be controversial. People actually leveraging functional tests for performance testing. I think it could get kind of controversial. So, Alex, any thoughts on this?
It's not so controversial. If you, yes, if you come with idea that you just use functional test, it get a little bit controversial because functional test designed to test performance and usually not includes what you can measure performance-wise. But actually, it is old trend, and the problem before, again, even in load runner, you could use some graphical UI scripts, but you needed a separate machine per user, so it was not scalable. Now it is much more scalable, and many load testing tool vendors add possibility to play back Selenium scripts or something like this, but it's still not well integrated. And another problems, I've evaluated quite a few attempts with that tools, and in my word, turn out that there is no good tools for that, because again, with some advanced functionality, it doesn't work well. For example, some applications I'm working with use some built-in component to work with Word document, PowerPoint documents, and that is not a web GUI. So tools that web GUI tools, they don't work with that. Or even just when you open a file through Windows dialog box. So I see trend, I see good promise in it, because again, working on protocol level when you don't even know if your script is broken or not, definitely it's much simpler would be just to have scripts that simulate interaction with GUI, if that would be stable and reliable. But unfortunately, we are not there yet, in my understanding.
So Alex, you bring me back down my memory lane for LoadRunner. We used to, in 2001, had a Citrix vUser with GUI vUsers running like multiple Citrix windows with images to automate a non-web type automation application. It was kind of cool. So I don't know, Leandro, any thoughts on this?
Oh, many. I can very much say what you would define it as controversial. And I agree with what Alexander just mentioned, the needs, the uses, and no tool is inherently good or evil depending on what is the use that you are giving to it. And I think warning that I would give on this, on the controversial side, is to be careful of thinking browser-based simulations or automations for load testing are a right-away choice. I would be careful jumping at it. Tend to be a little bit heavier. We have a lot of cloud computing processing power, but I would say more personally, the OCD in me, the performer is a bit uneasy on the waste of horsepower in the cloud doing some browser simulations when you could do perfectly fine simulations with the protocol level. But, and here's a big but, as Alex mentions it's case to case dependent. There are some times where even if it's a web protocol, might be going HTTPs through the wire, the wireless, the ether. There might be applications that you just plainly cannot automate at a protocol level. And on those cases, it's very useful to have this type of load testing tools that leverage the full browser. And as well, they tend to be a little bit, there are some benefits as well, tend to be a little bit more realistic or reliable just out of the box to what the tool is the application is doing on the web. Because at times you would record, as Alex said, a protocol-based communication, and for some reason it didn't cut some heavy images, some JavaScripts, or some things that got wonky in the front end or were doing those communications. Asynchronous patterns, some of the protocol automations cannot do some of these HTTP calls that happen simultaneously. Many of our automations is this request, I am done, I receive it, then this request, then this request. So it depends a lot on what you're looking for, what are your means, your capabilities. Another huge benefit that the browser load tests, load automations provide is that, of course, they don't deal with dared or damned correlations that some of us love them, some others totally hate them, cannot deal with them. So, and as a QA manager, probably you would get more instant benefit of being able to automate some load tests without using these correlations. Probably could be more stable, but at the same time, you need to balance and measure, okay, am I going to be doing this for long periods of time, huge amounts of users, and what are the benefits that I'm going to receive from this? Again, I personally would always recommend that when you need to do big ass load tests, do not try to do them through browser-based load tests. But at the same time, you get benefits from them. You get some of the browser behavior in your tests. You get some metrics that probably would not happen because of the load. So in those terms, I would use traditional functional automations and gather some of those performance metrics. Not long ago, I gave the example that this is a little bit like if you were testing an IKEA factory, and the web side would be you assembling the furniture that you got. How efficient is that assembling? Doesn't have to do too much with the load being at the factory that will send you the pieces. So I see very good uses for automations at a browser level. But again, I might start to sound repetitive. I do not recommend it unless you must use it that way for browser-based automations.
So
or
I would say it depends. I would use it for lightweight activities or almost like a gateway thing for someone to get into more hardcore performance. If you're doing a true enterprise performance test, then of course, you're not going to just use browser-based automation. But I think if you can leverage assets you already have, get your team some information if they're not already gathering some sort of performance metrics, I think it's a good way to start, get them familiar before they actually dive into more protocol level. And
if I could say, use them both.
Yes.
You'll get the benefits from both sides. You be able to trim out some of the web front-end issues, that those style sheets that are at the bottom, that the page is painted in a weird way, but at the same time, you could be stressing the system. So again, just because you can have one side covered, you are not going to be careless with the other side. You need to be risk mitigating on both ends.
And that's a great segue into our session at the Perf Guild this year. Definitely check it out. 1 week away. Hybrid load testing, the best of testing using protocol and real browsers, not one or the other. So if you're interested in hearing more about this, go to perfguild.com and register today. All right, so my next. Now this might just be pie in the sky. This might be wishful thinking. I think a new trend is shift right with digital experience analytics or AI-based machine learning type activities. And what I mean by this is I've been talking, maybe because I talked to a lot of vendors, that they've been telling me they can monitor production and based on production, know what your real users are doing, create a model out of that, and then based on that model, know how to create a proper performance transaction mix because it already analyzed what's really happening in production. So using machine learning, ideally, would be able to do this type of thing. Like I said, don't know if it's all pie in the sky, but Alex, any experience with this?
Yes. So, leaving AI to Jonathan to tell about, I would say we definitely have shift right trend, but I would say on much lower level. And because now we have basically everything centralized. Problem before was, for example, especially for vendor, you do your system and you, for example, send out CDs with the system to your customers. So if you have any problem, you need to do everything from the start, and only thing that you had was performance testing. So you did a lot of performance testing. Now you have it in cloud, you deploy it in cloud, and if you see a problem and you implement it properly, you could back out the change and return with previous version and fix it. So actually we had say performance risk in that sense diminished. So that is why I see trends that many try to address performance issue in production, not during testing, which is dangerous one by my opinion. But in some cases, when you kind of what you're doing is not so critical, which by the way, all this social media and such things which dictate fashion nowadays are. It is not a big problem if you don't see one post or something. So they could allow themselves to just monitor, and scale is too big to do full scale testing of such system. So there is such trend, and that is trend somewhat negative to performance testing. It has some meaning in it because we can mitigate performance risk by other ways now, but it is overused because some just start to rely on this reactive approach based on production and give up on performance testing, which is proactive, that prevent you from deploying these issues into production. And of course, another trend that helps with that is DevOps, means that you have communication between developers and production. So you could get information from production to fix problems, which was rather problem before.
Absolutely. Leandro, thoughts?
Well, another big and wide topic to talk or analyze. Again, as Alex said, AI is a monster on itself that can be leveraged in crazy multiple ways. I think that a first thing to consider for this type of approaches, production testing and applying AI, monitoring it, business intelligence and on AI. I think one limitation that most organizations face on this is the cost of such solutions and environments and implementing them. Because for some of them, you need a robust monitoring and logging solution on an APM, things in that line. On the other way, would you need as well the capacity to generate and simulate multiple production environments of the same to try to approach some of these release techniques, and as well to have a very good AI engine that some APMs already have, but tailor suited to what you are needed and to tuning and this unicorn or mythical creature lately being called as self-healing, that the environment can self-correct and create many things. In paper, all of this is possible. Most probably, some of the big companies in technology, the Facebooks, the Netflix, the Googles, all of them probably are already doing it. But correctly integrating all of those pieces, I think it's still a little bit in the all of them, or some of them are not on themselves. Look, what I'm going to say, rocket science to integrate all this and work well. Because on one hand, you need to understand very well logging, creating huge logs of meaningful information, then understanding a lot of machine learning and AI, first to be able to analyze those logs and from them teach your machine learning platform and start creating some rules for the AI to work on. And as well, performance optimization, configurations, metrics, user statistics. I personally am very excited of the possibilities that all these can bring, but definitely are areas that you need to be very aware and very knowledgeable to very well exploit some of these capabilities. As an example that I always give, and it's often around Facebook where I personally feel it more or think is more visible. Some of this machine learning, of course, Facebook is using it very strong. And that is the way that from these utilization logs, statistics, performance metrics, response, and how many times you click everywhere on each place, Facebook can easily right away tell you, hey, probably you like this person and want to be friends with them. And you might go paranoid right away, like, hey, I just saw at this person's picture for 3 seconds. Yes, I'm kind of attracted, interested, whatever you want to call it. How did you know? And many of these are analyzing and passing through huge AI algorithms, all of these things. On the other hand, it gives you the capability to quickly understand, hey, this is the area of my application is being clicked the most, that I have to keep up, is more critical, analyze and feedback. There are companies like Akamas that are through AI analyzing all the metrics on your system and the possible configurations to let the tool to figure out what is the best mix. And as well, analyzing those logs, you can easily probably send it backwards and say, hey, most of my users do this action path, and right away from them, gather the most common test cases for load testing, for functional testing, user acceptance testing. And even deeper, you have lots of logs in terms of communication. Feed those at a protocol level, feed those to the AI, teach it, and hey, tell me right away what are the correlations that I need to be applied to these test cases that have been generated, and create some automations automatically, a little bit Inception-like for me. So the capabilities are huge, but I still feel that a non-Google level, Netflix level integration is still a little bit rocket science for the everyday organization to assimilate. We're not there yet, but getting pretty quick.
Absolutely. All right, so my next trend and like I said, I don't know if this is just a wishful thinking, is chaos engineering, resilience testing. With COVID-19, I've seen 3 different companies bomb. The first one was the Robinhood financial application, which went down during one of the busiest days in the stock market, basically, where people couldn't log in. And because of that, they lost a lot of money because they couldn't trade, they couldn't sell, they couldn't buy. So just think of all the users they lost because of performance issue. If you looked at why it went down, it's because they had a spike in traffic that they weren't expecting. The other one is the Small Business Association that did a paycheck protection program where a bunch of small businesses were applying to the government to get money to be able to cover the payroll for the next 2.5 months. That got slammed as well, and that was down for like 8 hours once again due to they were getting overwhelmed with the amount of transactions going on there. And the last one was Real Games released a game for free. I don't know if it was Grand Theft Auto or something. And because more people are home now, I guess they didn't anticipate more people will be out to download it. And because of that, the site went down. So I think we're going to see more focus, hopefully, on more this chaos engineering, resilience testing, be able to test our systems for the unknowns. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm curious to know Alex's view on this, if I'm even making sense. Alex?
Yes, I agree. Actually, it again always was there, so
Yep.
we were supposed to test reliability or resilience. And actually, largest performance-related group in Oracle named PSR, Performance Scalability Reliability Group. So often to all this kind of testing inside Oracle, it refers as PSR testing. But interesting here that this resilience testing somehow happened inside development with new name. chaos engineering. So instead of, say, testers just do more reliability and resilience testing, it happens that it materializes completely different discipline, mostly inside development and operations.
Mm-hmm.
That very interesting phenomena, because actually it is a clearly part of performance and reliability testing. And the only thing that chaos engineering usually were done originally in production, but actually, say now it moving to testing side too. I talk, for example, with some vendors like Gremlin, and they
Yeah.
saying that yeah, many using it in testing, just not necessarily in production, and that is where you should start. I agree that you cannot test everything in kind of testing or stage environment, especially with this huge development. But first, do what could you do in testing environment, and then go in production for what you cannot test in testing environment. That's my opinion, but it's not going that way so far.
Right. Leandro, any thoughts on this type of testing?
Well, as Alex mentioned as well, it's something that tends to be overlooked and as well falls into this capacity planning,
Right.
this limit and spike test, crazy scenarios. It's difficult. It's true that we always look at organizations like this and say, "Hey, how were not you prepared for this?" And as customers get super mad and probably get some financial impacts, as you mentioned it with Robinhood.
Yeah.
We know that that was I got stuck a little bit on some of those, and in critical times and precisely when your customers will feel it the most, will probably need it the most, the balance in between, as you mentioned with the pay protection program, there's the monopoly side of things. But if your organization that is vulnerable to this type of things, and definitely there's a competition that your customers can jump to, or even if there's
That's true.
something serious, deadly, life risking, you should pay a huge amount of attention. Where I don't know if these type scenarios relate that much to chaos engineering, because from my perspective, chaos engineering um, focuses on trying to be resilient against randomness and events internal to your system that could happen, services going down, databases not responding, building resilience from within. What the other side of things, the crazy scenarios that we have been experiencing given the pandemics, I think those fall into the crazy scenarios. The what was the name of this guy? The Murphy law scenarios that we should test if something uh, wildly crazy could happen in our in our systems. Probably we should test it. Probably we should at least have a plan against it and make sure that our systems, if not survive, probably will come back the fastest. We will be able to service to implement, I don't know, uh, entrance rooms to hold our systems while our customers while the others are completing their transactions, mitigations plans for crazy scenarios and scenarios that you always try to blame it, but organizations like Robinhood were like, we were planning to probably 2x the amount of transactions, and we were good by that. But the sudden stock market crash brought us 20 times the
Right.
load that we usually have, and we absolutely could not foresee that that would happen. And well, you're on an online transaction and trading platform, you need to plan for that and be
Mm.
ready for those crazy increments. that could affect you. So it's really important. As Alex mentioned, it started as resilience, but I liked the twist in chaos engineering, like the companies like Gremlin are doing uh, weird things that can happen inside of you, but as well test and prepare. If you cannot test, at least have a plan for what would happen if
Right.
your customers suddenly you have 10 times more trying to access, 20,
Abs-
100 times, I don't know.
Yeah. I almost think of it, is it a rebranding thing? Like chaos engineering sounds so cool, where Alex mentioned we always did capacity planning, but now it almost sounds like chaos engineering. I don't know. More people are getting involved in it maybe because of the name. So my last trend is this is probably a softball performance in CI/CD. I know Alex has a strong opinion on this. He wrote to me after I released this. For me, I think performance in CI/CD. I've been getting more people. How do I get my performance tests mixed into when my code checks in, my developers check in code? How do I know that performance didn't get better or worse? I definitely see that as a trend. But Alex, do you have any specific thoughts on this particular trend?
Completely agree with it. I just wanted a little bit to extend it.
Yeah.
So it is sub-trend of, say, automation, because for continuous integration, especially if you have a lot of commits per day or even per minutes, it means that you cannot run any long tests. So yes, I guess you need to build in some performance measures. Maybe for one user, maybe you could insert even few users and see it, but you cannot run any serious performance tests. So for example, what we doing right now after discussion with minimal checking on, say, CI, I just run automatic tests overnight. So it is not exactly in CI path, it is in parallel to it, but I just run more serious, longer tests. It's not full tests still, but they take about 6 hours. So you definitely cannot put it into CI, but it turned out very beneficial to have it running daily, because if you find a problem next day, you could easily get back to the source. If you find the problem in a month, you have so many changes that you spend enormous amount of time and efforts trying to figure out what is the root cause.
Absolutely. And Leandro, thoughts on this particular trend?
Well, I think the key word here is continuous. When you have continuous integration, you have to guarantee continuous performance testing. I agree the challenges to pulling off continuous load tests that poses a challenge, because the traditional steps were to execute a big as load test or medium load test and have some metrics, some understanding of your system, because it was not going to change in a month, 6 months, in a year, or probably ever. It was just a single release. But continuous integration, you have to guarantee to be continuously testing performance. The best way to continuously test it is to monitor whatever activity is on your environment. And a key element here is that continuous insertion of new code. What you want to verify is that it's not breaking stuff that worked before. And from this, you need to focus on deviation analysis, variations from previous metrics. So the key point here in performance testing is that testing, you should be gathering these metrics continuously and at different levels. Single user, a few threads, a few durations, few users with some duration, at the code level, unit level. So you need to start to catch those problems that could happen way earlier. The switch left movement with continuous integration has to be considerably aggressive. And at the same time, you have to push everything to the right as well to be able to detect right away. As you push something in this continuous integration, if it generates an impact, a deviation, it comes wrong in any way, one, you need to be able to detect it again right away. And two, to be able to roll back or switch off that new feature. Feature toggles are very good, blue-green releases, and those are complete musts in your continuous integration test efforts. You cannot go without them. And as Alex mentioned, it's very complicated to do very realistic load tests continuously because they tend to last a little bit longer, require more preparation. And sometimes you do not have time for this. The check-ins bring so many changes. So switch left, again, ask your developers to update any automation that you might have. And last, I would say, have a suite that is continuously executing not the load test of the load that you will have in your environment, but that continuously is running some load tests, let's say every hour, every day, depending on how often are you introducing code, so that you detect these deviations rather than trying to do the big ass load tests, because you already have an environment in production. You know that more or less survives. You don't want that any of the new things coming will break it. So you analyze any deviation. If you find it, you push back. If nothing seems wrong, you let it go. Most probably it will survive. And if it doesn't, you must be able to turn the switch off and roll back to how it was and fix it. So more or less, those changes, I think, should definitely be applied.
Absolutely. So thank you, Leandro. Thank you, Alex, for joining us. Alex and Leandro joined me like 1 hour before I told them, hey, can you join me? They jumped on a call because they are awesome. Thank you so much for all your insight here. I really appreciate both of you. Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure as usual. There you go, Joe.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
And thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Good weekend. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Adios.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, awesome. So that was Alex and Leandro joining us. Really good insight there around the top, well, I call them the top 6 performance trends I'm calling in 2020 and beyond. And as you notice, Leandro and Alexander, they do this day in, day out. So they have really good real user insight here as well. So really was happy to have them join us last minute at the Guild. All right, so just a reminder, this edition of the TestGuild meetup is sponsored by Testem. And Testem wanted to give back to the community during this time of need. Make sure to check out their free community plan, which now includes 1,000 runs per month free. And I'm told that this is not going to last forever, so you definitely want to get this offer. If you're joining us in our normal meetup, you just click on the button down below. If you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, there will be a link there after this as well on the replay. Definitely check them out if you want to see if AI is a real thing. Testem also is known for the AI type technology. So maybe you can leverage this and see, hey, can this help me with performance testing? So definitely check them out. And PerfGuild is just 1 week away. PerfGuild is the online conference dedicated 100% to helping you succeed with creating end-to-end performance testing awesomeness. Check it out at perfguild.com. And if you use the code GuildCoin50, you'll get $50 off your ticket price. Let me put that on the screen so you can see it. It is GuildCoin50. So when you go to checkout, there's a thing, discount code. Click on that and enter in GuildCoin50. You'll get $50 off your ticket. And a lot of these trends are actually covered at this year's PerfGuild. Really have a great lineup. Really excited to have these folks join us. A lot of newcomers, so definitely check it out at perfguild.com. And there's the Guild coin code you can use to get $50 off. All right, so next week, I'll see you. I'll send out an invite for this next meetup, which is going to be on Puppeteer, Playground, and Playwright. So newer technologies, there's been a lot of talk around Playwright. I actually interviewed the manager of Playwright at Microsoft on my last podcast. So definitely check that out as well. It should be a great meetup there on that topic. So hope to see you all there. And thank you for joining this meetup, and see you next week. Thanks so much. Cheers.